evening, everybody. Welcome. It's lovely to see you all tonight. Thank you so much for coming out. We've had a run of non-fiction launches over the last few weeks, so it feels like such a treat to have a wonderful fiction launch come along tonight. I just wanted to mention before we get started, Elleke's publisher, Caravan Press. There are a few people in this country publishing really excellent local fiction, and one of them is Caravan Press, which is founded and run by Karina Shurek. As with most independent presses, she runs a small but outstanding publishing schedule, and I just wanted to pay tribute to her and to Caravan. She's had many award-winning titles for such a small little press, including Karen Jennings' Booker shortlisted title, The Island, and Andrew Brown's Sunday Times winner, The Bitterness of Olives. I think we desperately need presses like this to continue promoting outstanding fiction in this country. So please do support them and please do buy the books. It's a great privilege to be launching Elleke Boehmer's new book, Ice Shock, at Love Books tonight. I'm afraid I only picked it up this afternoon to get a feel for things, and I can absolutely assure you that you're not going to want to put it down once you've started it. I'm itching to get back to it, and a very good sign is that I can remember the characters' names. Elleke, I'm very much looking forward to this conversation, and it's wonderful to have you here tonight. Thanks for making the time. Just a little about Elleke. She's a Durban girl, but she left our shores a while ago. She's been Professor of World Literature in English at Oxford University since 2008. She writes fiction, criticism, and biography, and is the author of 5 novels. Her novel, Shouting in the Dark, was the winner of the Olive Schreiner Prize. Her work's been translated into many languages, including Arabic and Mandarin. And she's got a new non-fiction book coming along, which I had a glimpse of earlier, which is going to hopefully be available through Wits Press next year. Chatting to Elleke tonight, it's always lovely to have Michele here. Michele Magwood is a well-known book journalist and a general all-round champion of all things books. In fact, if there's a book event in this country, you can be sure Michele has got something to do with it. She's made a huge contribution to books in this country. She's also an editor, and finally, she is also an author. Her beautiful new book is a book called Brahman Hills, which we've got for sale up there. It's about the garden, an amazing garden in KZN. And congratulations on that, Michele. Over to the two of you.
Thanks, Kate. It's very good to be here. I'm afraid Elleke brought the weather from the UK. But
sorry, I'm so sorry.
Can you send it back again now, please? I also wanted to say I really love this setup with the books behind us, yes. Because I always, when we're in there and I'm in the audience, I just get hungry. I'm just constantly reading that menu. So it's very nice for you to have this background. I always like to begin with outlining a story to draw an audience in. So if you can outline the story of Ice Shock for us, it's a very unusual and delicate novel. Tell us the story of it.
Thank you very much, Michele. First of all, for being here in conversation with me. And then I also just wanted to say a very big kind of enthusiastic round of thanks to everyone for coming this evening, especially friends from various different phases of my life. It's just it's a great joy that you're here. And thank you for the support. So Ice Shock, it is a love story. It's billed as a love story in the kind of subtitle. And how I thought about it right from the beginning is that it confronts the question, I'm not sure if it answers it, it explores the question of how we continue to love each other and hold each other in mind across distance, because to love somebody is also to hold them in mind, to hold them in the kind of center of our hearts, but also in the center of our minds. And these are 2 young people, Niall and Leah, who are separated through circumstance. I mean, kind of life happens, and we can't always put love first. Life happens, and life happens to them both. They both have ambitions, she more than he, and those life circumstances force them apart. But they are young, and they are idealistic, and they believe they can keep holding each other in mind and stay together. And that, holding in mind a kind of willed telepathy is how I've thought about it. When we're separated from our loved ones, looking at photographs, social medias, of course, has become a way of engaging in willed telepathy. But before social media, lovers who separated for whatever reason, looked at the same star in the sky, or looked at the moon, or thought of each other at a certain point in the day. And that willed telepathy is, I think, and this is expanding the love story out now to a larger dimension, which is there throughout the book, sometimes implicit, sometimes explicit, about how we also love beyond our actual beloveds, how we love the I mean, it's going to sound kind of bizarre and kind of too idealistic, but how we love the world. So these two lovers are separated by hemispheres, and they try to stay longitudinally connected. And the story, as we were saying earlier, Michele, when we had a quick chat, the story kind of oscillates between the two of them. The kind of the energy, the force field between the two of them moves from the one to the other, and it kind of keeps, like magnets, keeps flipping.
I'm going to ask Elleke to do a reading now, because she's chosen a reading that demonstrates how this amazing couple fell in love.
So which is actually always a good place to begin, is at the very beginning, and need a little ocular help, and perhaps actually it's also I would just like to read. There are 3 epigraphs, and the first one is from the amazing Irish poet Yvonne Boland, and it's from her poem The Garden, and it's just one line: "Where I stand, there is no then or once." Winter, Edinburgh to London. Leah Nash was not looking for love. Love was the last thing she needed. That winter morning, she wanted only to get out of town and head home. But then the trains south from Edinburgh were cancelled, floods on the line. So here she was at the coach station, 10 minutes to spare, dragging her backpack up into the London coach. Yesterday's interview had taken everything. It had felt like her life depended on the outcome, the fulfillment of every dream she'd ever had, the shelf of books she would one day write. But had they liked her? The 7 blank faces at the long table gave away nothing. She had blundered on through, ears ringing. "Sorry, could you repeat that, please?" she asked twice, 3 times. "I didn't quite get the question." Niall Lawrence wasn't looking for love either. Leant up against the coach window, he was trying to get home too. Kent via London. But he did like to be loved. That idea of a love match, a soulmate, this past weekend, something had changed about that. He'd been up north for a school friend's wedding, Steph, who was marrying Rosie. He'd watched the couple take their first dance, looking into each other's eyes, faces glowing, never dropping their gaze, and he'd thought, amazing. So if someone this early morning had asked him about love, say, this nameless stranger with red-brown hair in the seat beside his, asleep on his shoulder, uninvited, then he might have said, yes, carefully. But, he might have added, I don't think I've met them yet. The stranger stretched her arm across his waist. Inside her evaporating sleep, the body under her arm was warm, warmer than her own. Niall felt her breath on his face, feathering his cheek. A jolt. The coach engine coughed deep and low under their feet. Leah opened her eyes, rubbed her temple. She saw pale eyes somehow bearably close by, curious, maybe quizzical. The man they belonged to must have been cradling her for some time. She was slumped half across his chest. Beyond his head, she saw London's brown fuzz begin to thicken along the horizon.
And you never say it, but we know immediately that they've fallen in love. That awful old cliche, love at first sight. It really is true about this. It's a very subtle book. You know, you leave an awful lot to us, the lacuna of this relationship. It's almost like an eeriness. I kept thinking of the word gossamer as I was reading it. It's like gossamer. It's like glass. It's about fragility, I suppose, if it's about glass. How did you achieve that sort of eerie effect, and is that what you set out to do?
I mean, eeriness is something that was there from the beginning, and it was. I mentioned this oscillation, these magnets kind of turning back and forth, despite their separation. But I also crafted the story through. I kept seeing ice, which is another fragility. You know, I kept seeing ice flows and fragments and splits in ice and kind of people drifting apart on ice flows. And possibly kind of bouncing back together. And I wanted to create that effect even in the way that it's written. I mean, if for folks who will do me the honor of reading it in due course, it is, I work a lot with collage. It's a kind of collage writing and white space. And as you were just saying, Michele, what can be inferred from the gaps, you know, with the unsaid. There's also a lot about unsaying and half saying and obliquely saying, and not. I mean, we human beings do struggle to say the right word at the right time, which is why I think that line from Ivan Boland is so wonderful. So eeriness and a sense of threat and that sense of the kind of the dark sea stirring between the ice flows.
I was just going to say there, though, that if you've ever listened back or tried to transcribe an interview such as this, you'll realize how much is unspoken, how much is actually between our eyes, between our expressions, etc. So when your partner, when your love is honestly at the other side of the world, there isn't that. Even in social media, I still think you don't get that. But there we are. The ice, the crystalline, your crystalline kind of language. But there is a sense of menace from the beginning, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I kept going back and rereading pages, and I couldn't really put my finger on how you'd introduce this kind of. I suppose it's a beat. It's a beat somehow in the background of menace.
Yeah, I wanted to explore the things that put all that we hold dear under threat. I mean, and there is so much, you know, and the fragility of what we hold dear is so great. So I was constantly kind of working with. I mean, I'm thrilled to hear you say it, Michele, because I was constantly working with trying to evoke that sense of the things that threaten to undermine what we have together, and that undermine also that very, very fragile thing between people, and perhaps especially lovers, which is trust. And how to rebuild that when it has gone astray or when it has been broken.
So I think we can say that Leah, she wins her not a trip, it's a stay at university, probably Oxford, even though she was up in Edinburgh for the interviews. And Niall goes down to the South Pole to an Antarctic study, scientific thing. So you couldn't have got them actually further apart.
No, yeah, that was my intention, to stretch them apart as far longitudinally as it was possible to get. As I was thinking throughout, speaking of eeriness and speaking of dark seas stirring beneath ice flows, I was thinking throughout of that great stretch of the Atlantic. and how they are pulled apart by that.
I love this part of the book where he goes off to the station. A couple of years ago, I edited Daryl Bristow-Bovey's book, Finding Endurance, which I think a few of you will have read. And for a whole year, I was in the Antarctic and learned so much about it. For example, the color of ice flows, the extraordinary colors, etc., and words like ice blink and everything. So I felt very happy to be back down there again. But even so, I still kept feeling there's something going to happen here in this isolated place. You just kept that beat going.
But if we think of the Antarctic, we think of ice. But we also think of the non-human. I mean, the Antarctic, it's inimical to human life. And therefore also, I enjoyed playing with this kind of tension in writing this. We don't think of love stories. We don't think of the red beating heart. I mean, one of the colors of Antarctica there are many, many colors in the Antarctic, but red, unless it's the setting or rising sun, tends not to feature. So it was that, how is this love going to survive on ice and in relation to ice? That was an interesting question that I tried to answer.
Because then it actually becomes a story about loneliness and a story about aloneness, doesn't it?
Yes. And I played with, I do like sort of, the wordplay that some of this encouraged. So a longitude, length, aloneness, solitariness, yes, and then how we sustain connection. I mentioned that lovers traditionally, romantic lovers have kind of connected through stars, but we can't see the same stars when we're in, say, Europe as when we in the Antarctic. Yeah,
the Southern Cross is entirely different.
Yes, it is non-existent.
It's not. Well, yes. Well, of course it would be. Let's think about that for a while. Do you want to do that second reading?
Yes.
Showing their two perspectives.
Yes.
Of each other.
I mean, it is no accident. One of the a very generous reviewers who've written about this novel notice that the initials of the two are the reverse of each other, LN and NL, and the perspectives also constantly kind of oscillate, a word that I've already used. So here, let me just get it right. So first, I'm just going to read a very short snippet, because it is relevant to what Michele's been asking about distance and loneliness, and what I've been saying about connection and willed telepathy. So this is Christmas Eve, Solihull. Leah stood on the deck beside her mother's old hot tub and took a drink of the Chardonnay she had found in the fridge. She looked for the moon. It was a clear night. A few stars poked through the high cloud, but there was no moon. She pulled her scarf more tightly around her shoulders. So there'd be no call. That was hard. There's storm. I mean, sorry, I've done the bad thing of breaking my own reading. But it is important to say there's also a lot about climate and a lot about weather and a lot about the difficulty of actually getting that signal, but jumping across. So there's been a storm. She'd waited all day. Talk to you tomorrow, the subject line of his Christmas Eve email. And now this. Too many degrees of latitude between them. Too many miles of stormy ocean. She should have arranged a fallback. She hoped Niall had a fallback. They shouldn't have planned everything so finely. They should have taken their chances. She heard her mother's voice across her neighbour's fence, then the neighbour's answering chuckle. She declined their offer of a drink. She looked up at the stars, Orion, the bright belt. She imagined Niall looking up at the stars and the starlight sparkling on the surrounding snow. That's how she'd try to think about him tonight, stepping outside exactly like this, shivering and looking up at the stars. And then we move to Niall's perspective. It's a little bit later in the story, August, McDonald's station. And Niall is at this point in discussion with the team doctor, who's called Chris. When are you calling home next? Chris removed the needle, his forehead wrinkling. He pressed a swab he pressed a swab to the welling head of blood. Next weekend, is it? Yes, Niall said, around then. My sister's getting married, so definitely by the end of the month, really soon. But he'd missed his phone calls home this month, in fact, all of them. He hadn't booked them, and so far Rick hadn't reminded him, which was fine. He, Niall, was in darkness, locked down. His pole of the world was in shadow. There were 25 midnight days to go, give or take some noonday twilight. He didn't want to book in calls, not for the time being. He was emailing Leah, that was enough. Beyond her, he had nothing to say to anyone. Can't wait for that wedding call. He watched Chris label his sample. Important to keep talking to them out there, isn't it? Chris wiped and stored the vial. Keep things alive. We've got at least to try. Chris stood to check Niall's eyes. With his thumb, he drew down the left lower lid, then the right. Suspect you're anemic, he said. It seems to have come on quite quickly. You should take care. Anemia can be accompanied by lowered spirits, a bit of depression, a sense of insuperable obstacles, the world closing in. Dead right. On cue. There was noise in the corridor, boots thumping against the wall, Frank knocking the snow off his boots against the doorframe. Niall's heart twisted. Rick lifted his head from the desk and yawned. Niall looked levelly back at Chris. I miss colour. I'd kill to see some colours, he found himself saying. Mixed colours, greens, yellows, late summer trees. You keep an eye on yourself, Niall. Chris rolled his trolley across to Rick's desk, spoke over his shoulder. Come and see me in the surgery sometime soon, okay? We can talk further. Niall watched his screen springing into life. Take photo. His daily pop-up bounced in the corner. Then again, he said too loudly, there's a reasonable amount out there to see in grayscale, more than we might think. He clicked onto his new photo series, 29 photos so far, started at the aphelion, the day he'd considered butchering the National Geographic. Since then, every day at noon, he'd dragged open the door, poked his camera into the darkness, released the shutter, thwacked the door back shut. The raised camera did the rest of the work. He scrolled through the dark grey rectangles. He scrolled through the dark grey rectangles, very similar, but with interesting variations. Here and there, the effects were startling. The comet-like blotches, the cathedral arches and grotto shapes. Yesterday or the day before, there'd been a green flash across the black, a single streak of the aurora. He'd thought about showing the photos to Frank, but then it seemed like there was too much to explain, and he decided against it. Mostly, though, the pictures were grey or nearly black, a grey glaze for starlight on snow, dark grey streaks for high wind. Grayscale was a better reflection of how things stood. So every day he goes out and takes a picture of the ice, every day, and it becomes a record of the state of the ice and also the state of how he is.
His state of mind, which is grayscale. You really get a sense of him sinking, a sense of him losing himself. I think I'm going back to Antarctica and Daryl's book. There's certainly stories about madness, the madness of ships, Shackleton's ship and Scott's and others, the explorers out there in those endless winters, those black winters, aren't there?
Yes, and I mean, it is now thought that Scott himself was probably maddened by the ice and his experiences on the ice, because he made so many poor decisions, and was probably to blame for his death and the death of his small team on the ice. I mean, there are countless stories. I'm fascinated at the moment. I can't stop working on the Antarctic. I'm still thinking about it, reflecting on it. And one story that I'm very preoccupied with, which relates to signals and communication and interaction across distance, is about this guy, Jeffries, who was with the Australian explorer Mawson in the Australian Antarctic, kind of to the south of Australia. Now, Jeffries was a radio operator, and he was a pioneering radio operator. He mounted the first radio antenna that sent messages out from Antarctica to the outside world. But he was also kind of going mad out on the ice and the darkness, and he started to hear voices and believed that it was people from outside, not Antarctica, trying to communicate with him. So there's another story, and it was very interesting. Again, thinking of those white spaces and kind of this collage assemblage of the story. There was also, for me, that sort of sense of interruption and white noise and the static, and there's a lot about tuning in and then losing the signal again, and sort of grabbing a voice out there in the ether, and then it disappearing. That sense throughout of that communication doesn't, is very precious and very difficult.
But you weren't tempted to bring in a monster, were you? Something happening, something tapping outside.
As you know, Michele, there is a monster, but the monster isn't in the Antarctic. There is a predator in this.
There is,
unfortunately.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But can we talk then a bit about Southern imagining? How were you? I mean, how did it start being drawn to the Antarctic for you?
It's not all about the Antarctic. It's about the far south of the world. How long have we got? And this isn't. I mean, I'll come back and talk more about Southern imagining and ice shock again. But it started to dawn on me. And this is nothing that will be a surprise to any of you here, because here we all are in, Johannesburg, South Africa, at the southern end of the African continent. It's completely. Most of the world hasn't traveled south of the equator. That figures because only 11% of the world's population lives in the southern hemisphere. And it occurred to me, and I'm jumping several steps here, and it relates to what we were saying about distance and imagining, holding people in mind across distance in ice shock. It began to occur to me that one of the reasons we don't see the planet whole is because we don't see it from a southern point of view, and that we need to see the planet whole in order to begin to think about the planetary threat and the climate catastrophe. We need to see the planet not as a kind of giant, kind of Euro-America, Asia conglomerate, but with all this kind of this watery hemisphere important as well. So one tiny little fact that kind of opens up this idea is that the Southern Ocean has been warming faster than any other ocean in the world, but this wasn't noticed for ever so long because it's the Southern Ocean. It's out of mind. And then, I've been incredibly inspired by the amazing books, legends, stories, songs, poems of the far south, of which Frankenstein, funnily enough, even though it seems to take place on the North Pole, the final chase of Frankenstein and the monster across the ice is actually, I think, I've found ways of reading it south. So this is a planet flipping book. It's sort of, again, a sort of experiment with seeing things upside down. As in, so these two are in dialogue. Yes, yeah.
I think ultimately, Elleke, I think it's a book about art. So it is a book as well as what you're talking about. But at the end, I saw it as a book about art. I saw it as a book about creating art and about protecting that art, protecting that creativity. And it shows us so clearly the work of a writer, because that is what Leah was becoming.
Yeah, and thank you for that insight, Michele. Because I mean, but they're both artists. Niall's a photographer, and he grows into his medium as the story unfolds. And Leah is in a kind of apprenticeship. She keeps the experience that she goes through, and this kind of this holding in mind that I've been talking about leads to the honing, the refining of her craft, and she learns extremely slowly, but there's, I think, a kind of for me, a kind of beauty in that, and a kind of modesty that was important to work with. It's a gradual training and learning. It's not a kind of an overleaping success.
And there's that thread all the way through it, that thread that keeps us wondering, are they going to make it? Is this love strong enough? Are they going to make it? And it makes you think, can you truly love a person, truly love someone who you cannot see, who you cannot share everyday things with, particularly when you're in your early 20s and you're changing so rapidly. So that's the question hanging over, is whether that love can actually survive, whether it's strong enough, whether it's real.
Yes. And different readers of Ice Shock have come out with different readings of the ending. So I'd be very interested to hear what people...
But we won't tell you the ending now. Oh, dear. Can we talk about your life in Oxford, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure.
Now, we've talked about
Yes.
Ice Shock, because I'm fascinated by your title of Professor of World English.
Yes.
And the banquet that must open to you, America, and all the writings in English. And I'm fascinated by how you navigate that. How do you narrow down books? How do books find you?
Oh, those are huge questions, Michele. I'll try to do them a bit of justice. I was interested from the beginning. I leave the place where Leah is, and she's learning her craft of being a writer. I leave it unstated, so it could equally be Edinburgh, as you were saying, or Cambridge, or but in response to your question, kind of homing into Oxford. I mean, one thing, and this we didn't chat about it, earlier, but one thing is that I leave America, apart from African America, to one side. I don't go there. I read consciously and intentionally and willfully for the margins. I'm interested in border crossing and people who come in from the outside and who have stories to tell. So those are the lenses that I look for new books with. I'm also very interested in, I'm involved in running a centre in Oxford called the Centre for Life Writing, and I am very interested in the stories that people tell about their lives, the stories that they choose to tell, the patterns that those stories fall into, the unsaid. I've kind of mentioned that earlier, and how the unsaid is eloquent. So I'm very interested in diary form. I'm interested in testimony and witnessing. So it's those, you know, I by no means kind of have an open kind of in tray and just kind of whatever lands. And I'm increasingly actually interested in work in translation. I was completely over the moon last year when Han Kang you won the Nobel Prize. I was a judge of the International Book Cup a few years ago, and we selected Laszlo Krasznahorkai, who's this year's Nobel Prize winner. And I'm really interested in what survives the process of translation. Again, it's something about jumping across gaps and something about, willed understanding, finding a way to communicate between the literatures.
There's lacuna again.
Yes, lots of lacuna.
I think, would any of you like to join in the conversation here? If you've got a question or a comment you'd like to make with Elleke? Want to know about Antarctic?
Or what I have for breakfast. I mean, but some of you know that already in this room. I don't eat breakfast. I should.
Do you get to read much South African fiction?
I
or non-fiction?
It's become actually, it's a growing and kind of, it's a never-ending enthusiasm. When I first left this country to go and study in the UK, I ran away as fast as I could. It was in apartheid that I left. And, every summer school, because you could earn some extra money by teaching summer schools, and summer schools just wanted me to teach South African fiction. And I said, no, I'm writing a PhD on the West African novel. But it sort of taps you on the shoulder and it keeps calling you back. So now I'm, for the very first time, I'm teaching a course to some wonderful third years, which is on South African fiction. And I'm reading as widely as I can.
What's included in that?
Oh, it's the usual suspects. I'm so sorry.
I was telling Elleke earlier that I'd just been judging the Sunday Times Literary Awards, the Fiction Prize, and how I happened, and what a really tough race it is this year. It honestly is. I've never seen a shortlist like it of such strength. I really haven't. But I was telling Elleke that I was there for the very first one in 2001 when we started the Fiction Prize. And I think we had 11 books entered. And it was won by Zakes Mda. It was almost won by Zoe Wickham, who's just passed away. She was also in for it with David Story. But that was the range. There were 11 books that were entered. And I know in the Sunday Times that, you receive about 60 and then you narrow it down to a long list of 25 for us to read. So that is just an example of the burgeoning of South African writing, and that's only in fiction. And I can tell you that the non-fiction list is even longer. The entries are even longer because, in fact, non-fiction is what most South Africans read for reasons which I'm sure you'll understand. So I think there's a lot of reason to be very, very positive about South African writing. There really is.
Completely agree. I think this lady over here had her hand up. Yeah.
So, how did Antarctic come about? Had you visited Antarctic? Did you have this interest in it?
I have had very close friends who have gone to the Antarctic and have come back changed, without exception. There is something, I think, about the ice. And this is where I'm sure some of you in the room know the amazing poem by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which is about somebody who's becomes enchanted and bewitched by a terrible thing he does, but it's also about the environment. The ice was here, the ice was there, the ice was all around. So that has, I suppose, that has been on my mind for 30 years or more. And there's something also about, I mentioned border crossing a few moments ago, but there's something about the edge and going over the edge, both in a real sense, as in the edge of the world, but also in multiple metaphorical senses. You know, what it is to touch darkness, to approach the ice, to go across the limit, and also there's another wonderful book called Skating to Antarctica by Jenny Diskey. I don't know if anyone in the room knows it, but she kind of leaves open whether she ever reaches Antarctica, and it's that idea of something that is reached and that changes you forever, or perhaps not reached, but still the journey changes you. That has continued, and I had to, in the end. This is my lockdown novel, you know, and I mean, actually, and I'm sorry I didn't say this earlier. During lockdown, we were all in the state that these two lovers are in this novel. We were all trying to, for those of us who were separated from our loved ones, and many people were, we were trying to, you know, exercise world telepathy. So the Antarctic kind of just surged back into it had to be, it was demanding to be written about.
So if it's on your bucket list, you must go.
Yeah, have you been?
It's quite surreal.
Well, here's the thing. I got myself to Ushuaia in the very, very south of South America. The Southern Cross is nearly overhead. And something stopped me from going further. So, but you know, life is long, we hope. And
We had clear weather going through the Lamia Passage on the way there, and on the way back you couldn't see your hand in front of it. We had 9-meter swells going through the Drake Passage.
That sounds
3
terrifying.
days. It was.
it is terrifying. The whole thing is
So a friend of
terrifying.
mine is a guest lecturer on she's done 59 trips to Antarctic, and she's in town now. You must meet her sometime. It's just phenomenal, the stories that she tells.
It is. It's a phenomenal place.
The water's so forceful that it actually broke glass, you know, on one Drake crossing. It was very scary. Not the one I was on, fortunately.
I mean, not for nothing are the two volcanoes on Antarctica called Erebus and Terra.
Yeah.
And Erebus is the word for hell.
And when you go on shore and there is the volcanic, you know, rock and everything's black. Everything's black. And we went to the southernmost tip and we went into the station, and it was clear when we arrived there, and within half an hour the wind was so strong that we could hardly make it back to the Zodiacs. Yeah, because you have to go on the Zodiacs to get back to the ship.
Thank you for saying
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
So try and get there.
I think we all must.
Yes. Although, go carefully, because every human visitor brings heat, brings pollution. Go carefully, go mindfully.
Do you think that's happening? I mean, reports are that it's becoming over-touristed already.
Yes, and ice flows are breaking that shouldn't be breaking, and glaciers are retreating from Ushuaia. I mentioned Ushuaia. From Ushuaia town, you can see 8, I've never seen anything like it, 8 glaciers. And I was admiring them and chatting to a glaciologist. I said, I've never seen anything like this. He said, yeah, but look at the brown edges. He said 5 years ago, just 5 years ago, those glaciers were down here, and now they're up there.
Craig.
Yes, Elleke, I'm interested in the writing process, or your writing process. The way you talk about the book, clearly you had some very strong themes in mind, some concept that you wanted to develop of a relationship over a long distance, and then the fragility of that relationship and the trust relationship with the fragility of life in the South Pole. I'm perhaps making that.
No, that's all spot on.
Yeah. So when you set out to write the book, did you develop the themes and then paint in the detail afterwards, or did you also sketch a plot and then paint in the details, as it were?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I mean gives lots of angles. I think every every novel, every fiction, because I also write short fiction. I love writing short fiction. That's another reason why maybe it's a composition of fragments, and demands a different approach. So for me, it's a question of kind of feeling mine away, like using dowsing rods, like divining rods, and just kind of feeling when. And then there's a point. I don't know if there are other writers in the room. If you have this, is suddenly the like. Has anyone ever done water divining in this room? It's just amazing to do. Suddenly the rods go down. They point. They found the water. They found the source. Sometimes that takes a lot of writing. You just sort of sit there, write away. Sometimes it takes a lot of note making and sketching. But because I think I am at heart a long short fiction writer, this one was always the kind of the image I had in mind was ice flows and combining those and creating a kind of mosaic. But different stories, because this was always going to be a love story in peril, in multiple senses of that phrase. Under peril, in peril, encountering peril. I was always working with, the kind of the cracks across a piece of enamel, that sort of sense of an impaired surface. That's something that I was always kind of working with. That's a kind of oblique answer, but it's a true one.
It's kind of an oblique book. Anyone else before we wrap up? I'm sure Elleke would be very happy to sign copies of the book if you'd like to buy them. They're up on the counter there. And come and, tell her about the ice. Thank you. It's been absolutely wonderful talking to you, Elleke. And, I look forward to your next.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michele. Thanks for the conversation and the attention. Thank you.